Marcus Chen's fingers trembled as he stared at the 27th rejection email glowing on his laptop screen, the familiar sting of disappointment washing over him like acid rain. The automated response was identical to all the others, impolite, professional, and utterly devastating. Thank you for your interest in our company. After careful consideration, we have decided to move forward with other candidates whose qualifications more closely align with our current needs. He could practically recite the words by heart now, each syllable a nail hammered into the coffin of his dwindling hope. The morning sun streamed through the grimy window of his studio apartment, casting harsh shadows across the stack of medical bills that had grown into a small mountain on his desk. 6 months had passed since the accident that had stolen the use of his legs and, apparently, his entire future. The drunk driver who had plowed into his car on that rainy November night had walked away with barely a scratch, while Marcus had emerged from 3 weeks in a coma to discover that his life as he knew it was over. Before the accident, Marcus had been a rising star in the tech industry, a brilliant software engineer with an MIT degree and a reputation for solving impossible problems. Companies had courted him with generous offers and signing bonuses. Now, despite his unchanged intellect and undiminished skills, he couldn't even secure an interview for positions he was overqualified for. The moment potential employers saw him roll into their pristine lobbies in his wheelchair, their expressions would shift almost imperceptibly, their enthusiasm cooling like coffee left too long on a counter. Marcus wheeled himself away from the computer, his calloused hands gripping the rims of his chair with practiced efficiency. The apartment felt smaller every day, its walls closing in like a trap he couldn't escape. His savings were nearly depleted, swallowed by medical expenses that insurance had deemed unnecessary or experimental. The physical therapy sessions had stopped when the money ran out, leaving him to navigate his new reality alone. The irony wasn't lost on him that in an industry supposedly built on innovation and forward thinking, disabled workers remained largely invisible. Silicon Valley preached diversity and inclusion in carefully crafted press releases while systematically excluding those who didn't fit their narrow definition of the ideal employee. Marcus had witnessed it firsthand in his previous jobs, the subtle discrimination disguised as concern for team dynamics or cultural fit. Now he was experiencing it from the other side, and the hypocrisy burned like a white-hot coal in his chest. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister Elena, who lived 3,000 miles away in Boston with her family. "Any good news today?" the message read, followed by a hopeful emoji that somehow made everything worse. Marcus couldn't bring himself to respond. How could he explain that each rejection felt like another door slamming shut, another piece of his identity being stripped away? Elena meant well, but she couldn't understand the suffocating weight of being treated as if your disability had somehow erased your entire professional existence. The refrigerator hummed in the corner, nearly empty except for a carton of expired milk and some leftover takeout he couldn't afford to replace. Marcus had always been fiercely independent, putting himself through college on scholarships and sheer determination after growing up in a household where money was always tight. His parents, first-generation immigrants from Taiwan, had sacrificed everything to give him opportunities they never had. The thought of calling them for help made his stomach churn with shame. As the day wore on, Marcus found himself scrolling through job boards with the mechanical precision of someone going through the motions. Senior software engineer, principal developer, technical lead, positions that should have been within his grasp, but now felt as distant as stars in a foreign galaxy. Each job posting seemed to mock him with its requirements: a fast-paced environment, collaborative workspace, dynamic team culture. Code words that really meant able-bodied preferred. The loneliness was perhaps the worst part. Before the accident, Marcus had maintained a busy social life, meeting friends for drinks after work, playing basketball on weekends, dating occasionally. Now his world had contracted to the four walls of his apartment, his only regular human contact the brief interactions with delivery drivers who brought his groceries and the occasional video call with family members who struggled to hide their pity. It was during one of these endless job searches that Marcus stumbled upon a forum for disabled professionals. The stories shared there were heartbreakingly familiar: brilliant minds sidelined by prejudice, talents wasted because of narrow-minded assumptions about capability. But among the frustration and anger, he found something else: an innovation born from necessity. Disabled individuals had created tools and solutions to navigate a world not designed for them, often with remarkable ingenuity. One post caught his attention. A woman named Sarah, blind since birth, had developed a revolutionary screen reader that could interpret complex visual data for scientific research. Another contributor, James, who had lost both arms in military service, had pioneered voice-controlled programming interfaces that were being adopted by major tech companies. These weren't just assistive technologies, they were breakthrough innovations that benefited everyone. The seed of an idea began to germinate in Marcus's mind as he read through dozens of similar stories. What if the barriers disabled people faced weren't just obstacles to overcome, but problems that needed solving for everyone? What if the very discrimination that was destroying his career prospects could become the foundation for something transformative? Late that night, Marcus wheeled himself to his desk and opened a new document on his laptop. For the first time in months, his fingers moved across the keyboard with purpose rather than desperation. He began to sketch out a concept that had been forming in the back of his mind, an AI-powered interview platform that would eliminate bias by focusing purely on skills and competencies, removing the visual and physical cues that led to unconscious discrimination. The more he wrote, the clearer the vision became. Traditional interviews were fundamentally flawed, riddled with biases that went far beyond disability discrimination. Age, race, gender, appearance, accent, educational background, all of these factors influenced hiring decisions in ways that had nothing to do with job performance. What if there was a way to strip all of that away and evaluate candidates based solely on their ability to solve problems and contribute value? Marcus worked through the night, his excitement building as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The platform would use sophisticated AI to create customized technical challenges and situational scenarios relevant to each specific role. Candidates would interact with the system through various modalities: voice, text, code, visual diagrams, allowing them to demonstrate their capabilities in ways that played to their strengths rather than highlighting their limitations. The beauty of the system was its universality. While it would certainly level the playing field for disabled candidates, it would also benefit introverts who struggled in traditional face-to-face interviews, candidates from different cultural backgrounds who might be unfairly judged, older workers facing age discrimination, and anyone whose true potential wasn't captured by the artificial constraints of conventional hiring processes. As dawn broke over the city, Marcus leaned back in his wheelchair and surveyed the pages of notes and diagrams he had created. For the first time since the accident, he felt something that had become almost foreign to him, a hope. Not just for his own future, but for the possibility of creating something that could help countless others facing similar barriers. The next few weeks were a blur of research and development. Marcus threw himself into the project with an intensity that bordered on obsession, teaching himself new programming languages and diving deep into machine learning algorithms. His small apartment became a makeshift laboratory, with whiteboards covering every available wall space and multiple monitors displaying lines of code that grew more complex by the day. He began reaching out to others in the disabled community, conducting informal interviews to better understand the challenges they faced in the job market. The stories he heard were both devastating and inspiring. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a brilliant chemist with cerebral palsy, had been passed over for promotions repeatedly because colleagues assumed her speech impediment indicated cognitive deficits. Thomas Wright, a veteran with PTSD, possessed exceptional analytical skills but struggled with the stress of traditional interview environments. Maria Santos, who used a service dog for her visual impairment, found that potential employers were often more focused on accommodating her dog than evaluating her qualifications as a data scientist. Each conversation reinforced Marcus's conviction that the problem was systemic and urgent. Talented individuals were being systematically excluded from opportunities not because they lacked ability, but because the evaluation process itself was broken. The waste of human potential was staggering, and the impact on individuals was devastating. But it also represented an enormous opportunity for any company smart enough to tap into this overlooked talent pool. The technical challenges were formidable. Creating an AI system sophisticated enough to accurately assess complex skills while remaining completely unbiased required advances in natural language processing, computer vision, and predictive modeling that pushed the boundaries of current technology. Marcus found himself working 18-hour days, sustained by coffee and the growing conviction that he was onto something revolutionary. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday morning in March. Marcus had been struggling with the problem of how to evaluate soft skills, creativity, leadership, collaboration through an automated system. Traditional interviews relied heavily on subjective impressions and cultural fit assessments that were inherently biased. How could an AI determine if someone would be a good team player or an effective communicator without falling into the same discriminatory patterns? The solution emerged from an unexpected source. While researching cognitive assessment techniques, Marcus discovered work being done in behavioral economics on decision-making patterns. Rather than asking candidates to describe their leadership style or communication preferences, the system could present them with realistic scenarios and analyze their decision-making process, response time, and problem-solving approach. The AI wouldn't judge the solutions themselves, but rather the underlying thought patterns and cognitive frameworks that led to those solutions. This approach had profound implications beyond bias reduction. Traditional interviews often rewarded candidates who were skilled at self-promotion rather than those who were actually best suited for the role. Marcus's system would identify individuals who might be modest about their achievements but demonstrated exceptional problem-solving abilities, creative thinking, or collaborative instincts through their actions rather than their words. As the prototype began to take shape, Marcus faced a new challenge: funding. The development process had consumed what remained of his savings, and he needed capital to build a robust platform capable of handling enterprise-level deployments. His first instinct was to approach traditional venture capital firms, but his research revealed that less than 3% of venture funding went to startups led by individuals with disabilities. The same biases that plagued hiring decisions seemed to extend to investment decisions as well. Undeterred, Marcus began exploring alternative funding sources. He discovered a growing ecosystem of impact investors who prioritized social good alongside financial returns, government grants for assistive technology development, and crowdfunding platforms specifically designed for disability-focused innovations. The process of writing grant applications and pitch proposals forced him to articulate not just the technical specifications of his platform, but its broader social implications and market potential. The first significant breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a disability rights advocate who had built a successful consulting firm helping companies improve their inclusion practices, reached out after hearing about Marcus's work through the professional network. She offered not just funding, but strategic guidance and access to her extensive network of corporate contacts who were struggling with diversity and inclusion initiatives. Dr. Walsh arranged for Marcus to present his concept to a small group of forward-thinking HR executives from major technology companies. The presentation took place via video conference, with Marcus demonstrating the platform's capabilities using real-world scenarios from their industries. The response was immediately enthusiastic, but also revealing of the challenges ahead. "This is brilliant," said Janet Chen, head of talent acquisition at a major social media company. "But how do we know it actually works? How do we measure success when we can't see the candidates?" The question highlighted a fundamental shift in thinking that would be required. For decades, hiring managers had relied on gut instincts, personal chemistry, and visual assessments to make decisions. Moving to a purely competency-based system would require not just new technology, but new mindsets and evaluation criteria. Marcus spent the following months conducting pilot tests with several partner companies, carefully documenting the outcomes and refining the algorithms based on real-world feedback. The results were striking. Companies using the platform consistently identified high-performing candidates who would have been overlooked by traditional interview processes, including not just disabled candidates but also career changers, non-traditional educational backgrounds, and individuals from underrepresented communities. The most compelling case study came from TechFlow Solutions, a mid-sized software company that had struggled to find qualified candidates for senior developer positions despite months of searching. Using Marcus's platform, they identified Alex Thompson, a brilliant programmer who had been consistently rejected by other companies despite exceptional technical skills. Alex had Asperger's syndrome and struggled with conventional interviews, often coming across as awkward or disengaged despite possessing exactly the problem-solving abilities the role required. Within 6 months of joining TechFlow, Alex had revolutionized their core product architecture and led the development of a feature that increased customer satisfaction scores by 40%. The company's CEO, David Rodriguez, became one of Marcus's most vocal advocates, speaking at industry conferences about the untapped potential being missed by traditional hiring practices. Word began to spread throughout the tech community about this new approach to talent assessment. Industry publications wrote articles about the bias-free hiring revolution, and Marcus found himself invited to speak at diversity and inclusion conferences across the country. The attention was both gratifying and overwhelming for someone who had spent months in isolation, rejected and forgotten by the same industry that was now celebrating his innovation. But success brought new challenges. As demand for the platform grew, Marcus faced the daunting task of scaling both his technology and his business operations. He needed to hire employees, establish customer support systems, and navigate the complex world of enterprise software sales. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was now in the position of being an employer himself, with the opportunity to practice what he preached about: inclusive hiring. His first hire was Lisa Park, a business development manager who had left her previous job after facing discrimination related to her hearing impairment. Despite having an MBA from Wharton and 5 years of successful sales experience, Lisa had been repeatedly passed over for promotions because colleagues assumed her deafness made her unsuitable for client-facing roles. Under Marcus's leadership, she thrived, using her exceptional visual attention to detail and written communication skills to build strong relationships with potential customers. The second team member was Carlos Mendoza, a brilliant UX designer who had been unemployed for 8 months due to anxiety disorders that made traditional interviews nearly impossible. Carlos had taught himself advanced design principles through online courses and personal projects, but couldn't translate his skills into employment opportunities through conventional channels. His work on improving the platform's user interface was instrumental in making it accessible to HR professionals who weren't technically sophisticated. As the team grew, Marcus made a deliberate decision to prioritize diversity not just in disability status, but across all dimensions of human experience. The company culture that emerged was unlike anything he had experienced in his previous tech jobs. Communication happened through multiple channels: video calls, instant messaging, collaborative documents, and in-person meetings, ensuring that everyone could participate in ways that played to their strengths. Flexible work arrangements were the norm rather than the exception, with team members contributing their best work whether they were most productive at 6 a.m. or 10 p.m. The platform's capabilities continued to evolve based on user feedback and emerging research in cognitive assessment and bias reduction. Marcus partnered with academic researchers to validate the system's effectiveness, conducting longitudinal studies that tracked the performance of employees hired through traditional methods versus those identified by his AI-powered platform. The data consistently showed that candidates selected through the bias-free system performed better, stayed longer, and contributed more innovative solutions to business challenges. One of the most significant developments came from an unexpected collaboration with Dr. Amanda Foster, a neuroscientist studying decision-making patterns in individuals with different cognitive profiles. Her research revealed that many traits traditionally viewed as disabilities actually correlated with valuable cognitive strengths when properly channeled. For example, individuals with ADHD often demonstrated exceptional ability to identify patterns and make connections that others missed, while people on the autism spectrum frequently possessed extraordinary attention to detail and systematic thinking skills. This research formed the foundation for a new feature Marcus called cognitive diversity mapping, which helped companies understand not just whether a candidate could perform a job, but what unique perspectives and problem-solving approaches they would bring to the team. The tool reframed disability from a limitation to be accommodated into a source of competitive advantage to be leveraged. The business implications were profound. Companies using the platform began reporting significant improvements in innovation metrics, customer satisfaction, and employee retention. They were building teams with cognitive diversity that translated directly into better products and services. The financial benefits were compelling enough that even initially skeptical executives began embracing the approach. Marcus's personal transformation paralleled his company's growth. The man who had once sat in his apartment consumed by rejection and self-doubt now found himself at the center of a movement that was reshaping how the business world thought about talent and capability. He spoke at major conferences, advised Fortune 500 companies on inclusion strategies, and mentored other disabled entrepreneurs who were developing their own innovative solutions. But perhaps the most meaningful moments came from the individual stories of people whose lives had been changed by the platform. Marcus received hundreds of emails from candidates who had finally found opportunities that matched their abilities, and from hiring managers who discovered that their best employees were people they never would have considered through traditional processes. One story that particularly resonated was from Michael Chen, no relation despite sharing a last name, who had been injured in Afghanistan and struggled with mobility limitations that made traditional office environments challenging. Through Marcus's platform, Michael had been identified as an ideal candidate for a remote cybersecurity position with a financial services company. His military experience and analytical skills made him exceptionally qualified for the role, but previous employers had been unable to see past his wheelchair and service-connected disabilities. Within 2 years, Michael had been promoted to lead the company's entire cybersecurity division and had prevented several major security breaches that saved millions of dollars. His success led to the company actively recruiting other veterans with disabilities, recognizing them as a valuable talent pool with unique skills and perspectives. As Marcus's platform gained traction in the marketplace, he began attracting attention from major technology companies interested in acquiring his startup. The offers were substantial, enough to secure his financial future for life and provide generous returns to his early investors. But each potential acquisition raised fundamental questions about the mission and values that had driven the company's creation. The most serious offer came from Global Tech, one of the world's largest software companies, which saw Marcus's technology as a way to address their own diversity and inclusion challenges while potentially expanding into the rapidly growing HR technology market. The financial terms were generous, but the discussions revealed philosophical differences that gave Marcus pause. Global Tech executives were primarily interested in the platform's ability to reduce legal liability related to discrimination claims and improve their public relations around diversity initiatives. While they appreciated the business benefits of finding better candidates, they seemed less committed to the deeper transformation in thinking that Marcus believed was necessary for lasting change. The acquisition discussions forced Marcus to confront fundamental questions about his goals and values. Was he building a company to maximize financial returns, or was he leading a movement to transform how society thought about human potential? Could he achieve broader impact by selling to a major corporation with global reach, or would that compromise the mission by subjecting it to shareholders focused primarily on profits? The decision became clearer after a series of conversations with the disabled individuals and organizations who had supported him throughout the journey. They expressed concerns that corporate ownership might dilute the platform's commitment to serving underrepresented communities, potentially prioritizing features that appealed to mainstream customers over those that specifically addressed disability-related barriers. Marcus ultimately declined Global Tech's offer, choosing instead to raise additional venture capital from investors who shared his vision for systemic change. The decision required him to turn down immediate financial security in favor of the uncertain path of building an independent company, but it felt aligned with the values that had motivated him from the beginning. The months following the acquisition decision were among the most challenging of Marcus's entrepreneurial journey. Building an enterprise software company required skills and resources far beyond his technical expertise, and he found himself learning about sales processes, regulatory compliance, and international expansion strategies while simultaneously overseeing product development and maintaining relationships with existing customers. The stress of leadership combined with the physical demands of constant travel began taking a toll on Marcus's health. The spinal cord injuries from his accident had left him with chronic pain that he had learned to manage, but the intensity of building a high-growth company pushed his physical limits. There were days when he questioned whether he had made the right choice in turning down the acquisition offer, whether the pursuit of his vision was worth the personal cost. The breakthrough that sustained him through these difficult periods came from an unexpected source. Marcus received an invitation to speak at an international conference on disability rights in Geneva, Switzerland. The event brought together advocates, entrepreneurs, and policymakers from around the world to share strategies for creating more inclusive societies. It was there that Marcus met Dr. Kenji Tanaka, a Japanese researcher who had been studying employment patterns for disabled individuals across different cultures and economic systems. Dr. Tanaka's data revealed that the challenges Marcus was addressing weren't limited to the United States, but represented a global phenomenon affecting millions of talented individuals worldwide. The conversation with Dr. Tanaka sparked Marcus's realization that his platform could have international impact far beyond what he had originally envisioned. Different countries had varying approaches to disability accommodation and employment law, but the fundamental problem of biased hiring practices was universal. The AI-powered assessment system could be adapted to different languages, cultural contexts, and regulatory environments while maintaining its core functionality. This global perspective provided renewed energy and direction for the company's growth strategy. Rather than simply expanding within the American market, Marcus began developing partnerships with organizations in Europe, Asia, and other regions where demand for inclusive hiring solutions was growing. Each new market brought unique challenges and opportunities, requiring the platform to evolve in ways that strengthened its core capabilities. The European expansion proved particularly successful, as the region's stronger legal frameworks around disability rights created demand from companies seeking to comply with inclusion mandates while also finding the best talent available. The platform's ability to document bias-free hiring processes provided valuable legal protection while delivering measurable business benefits. In Asia, Marcus discovered that his technology addressed not just disability discrimination, but also cultural biases that prevented companies from recognizing talent from different educational or socioeconomic backgrounds. The rigid hierarchies and prestigious university preferences that dominated hiring in many Asian markets were creating similar inefficiencies to those he had originally set out to solve. As the company approached its 5th anniversary, Marcus reflected on the journey that had transformed him from a rejected job seeker into a globally recognized entrepreneur and advocate. The platform was now used by thousands of companies across 6 continents, had facilitated hundreds of thousands of bias-free hiring decisions, and had directly contributed to employment opportunities for tens of thousands of individuals who might otherwise have been overlooked. But the success metrics that meant the most to Marcus weren't revenue figures or user growth statistics. They were the personal stories that continued to arrive in his inbox from individuals whose lives had been transformed by finding work that matched their abilities and aspirations. Each story reinforced his conviction that the platform was addressing one of the fundamental injustices of modern society, the waste of human potential due to prejudice and narrow thinking. The company had also become a model for inclusive entrepreneurship, demonstrating that organizations led by disabled individuals could compete successfully in mainstream markets while maintaining strong commitments to social impact. Marcus's leadership team now included individuals with a wide range of disabilities and backgrounds, and their diverse perspectives had been instrumental in developing features and strategies that purely able-bodied teams might have missed. Looking toward the future, Marcus saw enormous opportunities to expand the platform's impact beyond traditional employment into areas like education, volunteer matching, and even social relationship formation. The fundamental insight that had driven the original development, that human potential was being systematically undervalued due to biased assessment methods, had applications far beyond corporate hiring. Educational institutions were beginning to explore using similar technologies to identify students who might thrive in non-traditional learning environments or who possessed talents that weren't captured by standardized testing. Non-profit organizations were adapting the platform to match volunteers with opportunities that leveraged their unique skills and interests. Even dating services were experimenting with bias-free matching algorithms that focused on compatibility rather than superficial characteristics. The technology that had emerged from Marcus's personal experience of discrimination was evolving into a broader framework for human assessment that could make society more meritocratic and inclusive across multiple domains. The implications were profound, suggesting that many of the social and economic inefficiencies that societies accepted as inevitable might actually be solvable through better technology and more thoughtful system design. As Marcus wheeled through the offices of his growing company, observing team members from diverse backgrounds collaborating on solutions that would impact millions of lives, he reflected on the unexpected path that had brought him to this point. The drunk driver who had changed his life in that moment of impact could never have imagined that the tragedy he caused would ultimately lead to innovations that benefited countless others. The rejection emails that had once filled Marcus with despair now seemed like necessary catalysts that had forced him to confront systemic problems he might otherwise have ignored. His personal experience of discrimination had given him insights into the flaws of hiring systems that he never would have developed as a successfully employed engineer taking the status quo for granted. In quiet moments, Marcus sometimes wondered about the alternative timeline where the accident had never happened, where he had continued climbing the corporate ladder as a talented but conventional software engineer. That version of his life might have been more comfortable, but it wouldn't have generated the innovations that were now helping others overcome barriers similar to those he had faced. The platform's success had also created opportunities for Marcus to influence policy discussions around employment discrimination and disability rights. He testified before congressional committees considering updates to the Americans with Disabilities Act, advised international organizations developing global accessibility standards, and consulted with governments seeking to improve employment outcomes for their disabled citizens. These policy engagements revealed the complex interplay between technological solutions and regulatory frameworks. While Marcus's platform could eliminate many forms of bias in hiring processes, achieving true equality of opportunity required complementary changes in laws, social attitudes, and institutional practices. Technology alone couldn't solve discrimination, but it could provide tools that made fair treatment more feasible and measurable. The journey had also taught Marcus important lessons about the nature of innovation and social change. Revolutionary solutions often emerged from the margins, developed by individuals who experienced problems that mainstream society had learned to accept or ignore. The outsider perspective that came with disability, while painful in many ways, provided insights into system failures that were invisible to those who benefited from existing arrangements. This realization influenced Marcus's approach to hiring and product development within his own company. He actively sought out team members who brought unconventional perspectives, whether through disability, cultural background, educational experience, or life circumstances. The resulting cognitive diversity had been instrumental in developing features and strategies that competitors had missed. The platform's evolution also reflected broader changes in how society thought about disability and human difference. When Marcus had first begun developing the technology, disability was primarily viewed through a medical model focused on individual limitations and accommodations. The platform's success had contributed to a shift toward a social model that recognized disability as the result of environmental barriers rather than personal deficits. This philosophical transformation had practical implications for how companies approached diversity and inclusion initiatives. Rather than simply adding disabled employees to existing structures, forward-thinking organizations were redesigning their processes and environments to leverage the full range of human cognitive and physical capabilities. The result was workplaces that were more creative, adaptable, and effective for everyone. As the company continued to grow and evolve, Marcus found himself increasingly focused on succession planning and long-term sustainability. The platform's mission was too important to be dependent on any single individual, and he wanted to ensure that the values and vision that had driven its creation would persist regardless of future leadership changes. This consideration led to the establishment of a nonprofit foundation dedicated to researching bias in human assessment and developing open-source tools for creating more inclusive systems. The foundation would serve as a permanent guardian of the principles behind the platform, conducting research that benefited the broader community while also informing the company's commercial development. Marcus also began mentoring other disabled entrepreneurs who were developing their own innovative solutions to societal challenges. The success of his platform had helped demonstrate that disability could be a source of competitive advantage in entrepreneurship, leading to increased interest from investors and accelerators in supporting disabled-led startups. The mentoring relationships were particularly rewarding because they allowed Marcus to share not just technical knowledge, but also insights into navigating the unique challenges that disabled entrepreneurs faced. From accessible office design to inclusive team management practices, there were countless practical considerations that mainstream business education didn't address. One of his mentees, Dr. Patricia Williams, had developed a revolutionary prosthetic limb control system based on her own experience as an amputee. Another, David Kim, was creating accessible gaming platforms that allowed individuals with various disabilities to compete on equal terms with able-bodied players. Each entrepreneur brought fresh perspectives on how technology could address overlooked needs and markets. The success stories emerging from this network of disabled entrepreneurs were beginning to challenge fundamental assumptions about innovation and market opportunity. Industries that had long ignored disabled consumers were discovering that accessible design often led to products that were better for everyone. The innovations that emerged from addressing edge cases frequently had mainstream applications that generated significant commercial value. This pattern of disability-driven innovation had historical precedents that Marcus found inspiring. The telephone had been invented by Alexander Graham Bell in his work with deaf individuals. The typewriter had been developed to help a blind woman communicate. Closed captions, originally created for deaf viewers, had become widely used by language learners, noisy environment viewers, and many others. Marcus's platform was part of this tradition of innovations that began as solutions to specific disability-related challenges but ultimately benefited much broader populations. The bias-free hiring technology was being adapted for uses far beyond employment, demonstrating the universal value of more accurate human assessment methods. As he looked toward the future, Marcus saw tremendous opportunities to expand this impact through emerging technologies like virtual reality, brain-computer interfaces, and advanced artificial intelligence. Each new technological capability opened possibilities for creating more inclusive and effective ways of evaluating and developing human potential. The journey from rejected job candidate to successful entrepreneur and advocate had taught Marcus that the barriers faced by disabled individuals weren't just personal challenges to overcome, but systemic problems that created opportunities for innovative solutions. The discrimination that had initially seemed like an insurmountable obstacle had become the foundation for building something that helped countless others while also creating significant economic value. Standing in his company's headquarters, surrounded by employees whose diverse talents and perspectives were helping reshape how the world thought about human capability, Marcus felt a profound sense of gratitude for the unexpected path that had brought him to this point. The accident that had initially seemed like the end of his dreams had actually been the beginning of something far more meaningful and impactful than anything he could have imagined in his previous life as a conventional software engineer. The future held unlimited possibilities for expanding the platform's impact and continuing to challenge society's assumptions about human potential. Each new customer, each success story, each life transformed represented progress toward a world where everyone would have the opportunity to contribute their unique talents and perspectives to solving humanity's greatest challenges. Marcus Chen had discovered that sometimes the most powerful innovations emerge not in spite of adversity, but because of it.